You are a god. Not metaphorically, not as a compliment, literally, an actual god. Thousands of years old, capable of magic that would make most beings in the universe question everything they thought they knew about reality. And your brother gets a hammer that everyone loves, a hammer that gets its own legends, a hammer that people write songs about. Meanwhile you, the smarter one, the more powerful one, the one who actually had to study and work and train to earn every ability you have, you get to watch him get all the credit, forever. Welcome to your life as Loki, God of Mischief, Prince of Asgard, and the universe's most consistently, spectacularly, cosmically overlooked person. Let's talk about it. We all know Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, the guy who keeps showing up in the wrong place at the wrong time and somehow making it everyone else's problem. The guy who gets stabbed so many times that death has basically become a recurring inconvenience rather than an ending. And on the surface, being Loki seems kind of incredible. Unlimited magic, immortality, a wardrobe that is genuinely outstanding, the ability to look like literally anyone, be anywhere, manipulate any situation to your advantage. But here's what nobody talks about. Every single time Loki has something good, something real, something that actually matters, the universe takes it away. Every time he tries to be more than the villain everyone decided he was, something goes wrong. Every time he reaches for something genuine, it turns to dust. Not because he's unlucky, because the universe looked at Loki and decided his role was to lose. Dramatically, repeatedly, for eternity. And that, when you actually sit with it, is one of the darkest things in the entire Marvel universe. Let's start at the very beginning, because everything about Loki's story starts with one fact that he didn't find out until he was an adult. He's adopted. Not just adopted, he was literally taken from a battlefield as an infant. His biological father, Loki, king of the frost giants, left him to die because he was small. Too small for a frost giant, not useful enough to keep. So baby Loki, already abandoned by his biological father, gets picked up by Odin, which sounds like a rescue. Except Odin didn't take him out of pure kindness. He took him as a political asset, a potential tool for peace between Asgard and the frost giants. Let that sit for a second. From the very first moment of his existence, before he could walk or talk or do anything, Loki was already being used, already a means to an end, already a piece on someone else's board. And he grew up not knowing any of this. He grew up thinking he was a prince, thinking he was Odin's son in every sense that mattered, thinking the slightly strange feeling of never quite fitting in was just him, just his personality, just the way things were. And then he found out the truth, in the worst possible way, at the worst possible moment, with zero preparation and zero support. Most people, when they find out something life-changing about their identity, get time to process it, get people around them, get support. Loki found out he was a frost giant while hanging off a bridge at the edge of the universe. That's not a bad day. That's a foundational collapse of everything you thought you were, happening in the most dramatic location imaginable. Now let's talk about Thor, because you cannot understand Loki without understanding what it's like to grow up in Thor's shadow. Thor is beloved. Thor is the golden son. Thor is the one everyone cheers for, the one the stories are about, the one who gets to be king. Big, loud, confident, beloved Thor, who didn't have to work for any of it because he was born into the role everyone already wanted him to fill. And Loki, smarter, more skilled in ways that actually require effort, more strategically capable in every measurable sense, gets to stand just slightly behind him, forever. At every celebration, every victory, every family dinner, Thor gets the glory. Loki gets to be the complicated one. And here's what makes it genuinely dark rather than just sad. Loki loves Thor, actually loves him. Underneath all the schemes and the betrayals and the centuries of complicated history, there is genuine love there. It's messy and painful and expressed in the most dysfunctional ways imaginable, but it's real, which means every time Thor gets the thing Loki wanted, it doesn't just sting as a rivalry. It hurts the way it only hurts when someone you actually love keeps accidentally winning everything you ever wanted. You cannot even properly hate him for it, because you love him, and that is so much worse. Let's talk about something that sounds like a punchline but is actually deeply tragic. Loki dies. A lot. Not once. Not twice. Multiple times. In multiple terrible ways. In multiple universes across multiple timelines if you include the full picture of his story. He gets stabbed. He falls into a void between worlds. He gets strangled. He dies saving people who spent most of their lives not fully trusting him. And here's the thing about dying repeatedly that nobody thinks about. It's not just physically terrible. It's what it does to the people who watch it happen. Thor watches Loki die multiple times, and every time, every single time, it is devastating. Not just for Thor, but for the audience. For everyone who has been watching this complicated relationship play out across centuries. And then Loki comes back. Because of course he does. Because death in Loki's case is less of a permanent state and more of a recurring subscription service that he keeps canceling and being re-enrolled in. Which sounds funny. It is kind of funny. Until you realize what it means. That every death Loki experiences, every moment of it, was real. The pain was real. The loss was real. And the people who mourned him did so genuinely. Only to have to process his return. Only to lose him again. Only to grieve again. Imagine being the person whose death is simultaneously devastating and expected. Imagine being grieved and then ungrieved and then grieved again so many times that even your own death stops feeling permanent to the people who love you. That is not immortality. That is something far stranger and far lonelier. Here's something that gets to the dark core of Loki's entire story. The universe decided very early on what Loki was, and once it decided, it never really let him be anything else. Villain, trickster, the one you can't trust, the one who will always betray you, the one whose good moments are probably part of a longer scheme. And here's the genuinely dark part. Once you've been given that label, once everyone around you has decided that's what you are, it becomes almost impossible to escape it. Because every good thing you do gets filtered through suspicion. Every genuine moment gets questioned. Every time you try to be something different, someone is waiting to point back at the last time you weren't. Loki spent centuries trying to prove he was more than the villain everyone decided he was. And every time he got close, every time there was a moment of genuine redemption, a real choice towards something better, something happened that pulled him back into the role. Sometimes it was his own choices. Sometimes it was circumstances. Sometimes it was other people refusing to see him as anything other than what they'd already decided he was. And here's what makes it genuinely tragic rather than just frustrating. Loki was never purely evil. He was never the kind of villain who enjoys destruction for its own sake. He was a deeply wounded person who was handed a role he didn't fully choose and then punished repeatedly for not being able to fully escape it. The mischief wasn't malice. It was the only power a second son with a false identity had over a world that had already decided where he stood. And then, finally, Loki started to change. Actually change. Not as a scheme, not as a manipulation, as a genuine, painful, hard-won evolution of who he was. He started choosing people over power. He started making sacrifices that cost him something real. He started being, slowly and imperfectly, the person he might have been if the universe had given him half a chance. And just when it seemed like the story might actually go somewhere worth going, when Loki had finally become someone who deserved a different ending, Thanos killed him. First scene of Avengers Infinity War. No dramatic speech, no meaningful last stand, just gone. Before he even had a chance to be the better version of himself he'd spent so long becoming. The universe gave Loki just enough time to almost become who he should have always been, and then closed the door. That's not tragedy in the dramatic sense. That's tragedy in the cruel, mundane, specific sense. The sense of a story that ends just before the part that would have made everything worthwhile. So here's where we land. Loki was abandoned before he could walk, raised to believe he was something he wasn't, spent centuries in the shadow of a brother he loved and resented in equal measure, was given a label he couldn't escape no matter how many times he tried, died repeatedly, grieved and ungrieved and grieved again, and finally, started to become something worth rooting for, just in time to have it taken away. He was the villain. He was also the most understandable person in the room. He was the trickster. He was also the most honest about how much everything hurt. He was the one who kept betraying people. He was also the one who kept coming back. Loki is what happens when someone with immense potential is handed the wrong story at birth and spends their entire existence trying to rewrite it, and almost succeeds. Almost. That word does a lot of work in Loki's story. Almost trusted, almost redeemed, almost free. For what it's worth, in the end, some version of him made it. Some version found peace. Some version got to be more than the God of Mischief. But the version who went through everything we just talked about, that version deserved so much better than what he got. Drop a comment. Did this hit different? Tell me which character should be next because the list is long and nobody is having a good time. Like and subscribe if Loki deserved better, which he did, obviously, without question. Yeah, that's the tragic reality of being Loki.